A luxurious yacht sails the Solent, its glittering guests hiding secrets as dark as the sea. When a priceless sapphire vanishes and a man lies dead, only Hercule Poirot's little grey cells can unravel the web of lies. Who stole the gem? Whose hand struck the fatal blow? Was it greed, betrayal, or a deeper motive? In a world of forged jewels and hidden fraud, every clue points to danger, and the truth lurks in the shadows. Join Poirot on the Sapphire Yacht, where no one is what they seem, and the killer is closer than you think. Chapter 1. The Sapphire Yacht Sets Sail. The late summer sun hung low over the Solent, casting a golden sheen across the water, as though the sea itself had been polished to a mirror's perfection. The Sapphire Yacht, a sleek vessel of opulent design, bobbed gently at the quay of Southampton's prestigious marina. To Captain Arthur Hastings, who stood on the polished deck, the scene was one of serene elegance, a perfect prelude to what promised to be a delightful weekend cruise. Yet, as he adjusted his straw hat against the breeze, a faint unease stirred within him, though he could not quite place its source. "Mon ami Hastings," came a familiar voice, precise and accented, from behind him. "You admire the sea, yes, but you do not observe it. The waves, they whisper secrets, if one listens closely." Hercule Poirot, resplendent in a cream linen suit, his moustache waxed to impeccable points, stepped forward, his patent leather shoes gleaming against the teak deck. His small, fastidious frame seemed almost out of place amidst the nautical grandeur, yet his sharp green eyes missed nothing. Hastings smiled, accustomed to his friend's penchant for cryptic remarks. "Really, Poirot," Hastings replied, "I'm not sure the sea has much to say about our little holiday. This is a pleasure cruise, after all. A chance to relax among good company." Poirot's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "Good company, you say? Perhaps. But the human heart, Hastings, it is never so simple. Even on a yacht as fine as this, there are currents beneath the surface, motives, jealousies, secrets." Hastings chuckled, dismissing the comment as Poirot's usual flair for the dramatic. The Sapphire Yacht had been chartered by Sir Reginald Vane, a wealthy industrialist with a reputation for lavish hospitality. The guest list was small but distinguished, a select circle of 8, including Poirot and Hastings, invited for a 3-day voyage along the southern coast. The occasion was his grey eyes glinting with pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," he declared, raising a glass of champagne, "to the Sapphire Yacht and the treasures that await us." Beside him stood his young wife, Lady Beatrice Vane, a vision in a flowing blue dress that matched her starting vivid eyes. At barely 25, she was a striking contrast to her husband, her beauty tempered by a certain aloofness. Hastings noted how her gaze flickered toward the other guests, as though assessing them. Among the party was Dr. Lionel Crawley, a physician of quiet demeanor, his spectacles glinting as he sipped his drink. His wife, Mrs. Eleanor Crawley, a sharp-tongued woman with a penchant for gossip, clung to his arm, her eyes darting about as if cataloguing every detail for later dissection. Then there was Mr. Julian Travers, a slick financier with a charming smile and a reputation for risky investments, accompanied by his fiancée, Miss Clara Hammond, a nervous young woman whose delicate hands toyed incessantly with a pearl necklace. Rounding out the group were Miss Lydia Pembroke, an eccentric spinster with a passion for gemology, and Mr. Victor Grayson, Sir Reginald's business partner, whose dour expression suggested he found little joy in the festivities. As the yacht's engines hummed to life and the vessel glided away from the quay, Hastings felt a pang of anticipation. The Sapphire yacht was a marvel, its dining saloon adorned with crystal chandeliers, its cabins fitted with mahogany and silk. Yet, as the coastline receded, the sense of being cut off from the world grew palpable. They were, for all intents and purposes, a closed circle bound by the sea. Dinner that evening was a grand affair, served in the saloon under the soft glow of candlelight. Sir Reginald presided at the head of the table, regaling the party with tales of his sapphire's provenance, a gem, he claimed, once owned by a Russian duchess. Lady Beatrice, seated to his right, smiled politely but said little, her fingers tracing the rim of a wineglass. Hastings, seated opposite Poirot, noticed his friend's keen observation of the group, his eyes lingering on each guest in turn. "Tell me, Sir Reginald," Poirot said, his voice smooth as velvet. "This sapphire of yours, it is of great value, no? And yet, you display it so openly. Is it not a temptation to those less scrupulous?" A hush fell over the table. Sir Reginald laughed, though it sounded forced. "My dear Monsieur Poirot, the sapphire is locked in a safe in my cabin. Only I have the key. Besides, I trust my guests implicitly." "Do you?" Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes gleamed. "Trust, it is a fragile thing, is it not?" Lady Beatrice's glass paused mid-air, and Mr. Gray—
Her anecdote was cut short by Mrs. Crawley's sharp laugh.
"Really, Lydia, must you turn every dinner into a lecture on stones? Let's talk of something pleasant."
The conversation shifted, but Hastings could not shake the feeling that Poirot's remark had struck a nerve. As the meal progressed, he noticed small details. The way Mr. Travers' smile tightened when Sir Reginald mentioned profits, the fleeting glance Clara Hammond cast toward Dr. Crawley, the way Lady Beatrice's hand lingered near her husband's as he spoke of the sapphire. After dinner, the guests retired to the deck for coffee, the night air cool and the stars brilliant above. Poirot, ever meticulous, declined a cigar, and instead sipped his tisane, his eyes scanning the horizon. Hastings joined him at the railing, the sea stretching endlessly before them.
"Poirot," Hastings ventured, "you're not suggesting there's trouble brewing, are you? This is a pleasure cruise, not one of your cases." Poirot's mustache twitched. "My dear Hastings, the human heart does not take holidays. Where there is wealth, beauty, and ambition, there is always the potential for complications." As if on cue, a sharp cry pierced the night. The guests froze, their heads turning toward the source. It had come from the direction of Sir Reginald's cabin. Hastings' heart leapt, and he exchanged a glance with Poirot, whose expression was unreadable. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, setting down his cup with deliberate care. "It begins." The guests rushed toward the cabin, Hastings at the fore. Sir Reginald stood in the doorway, his face ashen, his hands trembling. Behind him, the safe stood open, its contents spilled across the floor. The sapphire was gone, and with it, any illusion of a peaceful voyage. To be continued. Chapter 2. The Vanished Gem and a Darker Discovery. The air in Sir Reginald Vane's cabin was thick with the scent of polished wood and the faint tang of fear. The guests crowded near the doorway, their faces a mixture of shock and curiosity, as Captain Hastings pushed forward, his pulse quickening. The open safe gaped like a wound in the opulent cabin, its contents a scattering of papers and a velvet pouch strewn across the floor. The sapphire, Sir Reginald's prized treasure, was nowhere to be seen. But it was not the theft that froze Hastings' blood. It was the sight beyond the safe where a figure lay slumped against the cabin's far wall. "Monsieur Poirot," Hastings called, his voice sharp with alarm. Hercule Poirot, ever composed, stepped into the cabin with the precision of a cat. His small frame seemed to command the space, his green eyes darting from the safe to the figure. The other guests hovered, their murmurs rising like a tide. Sir Reginald, his face drained of color, stammered, It's impossible. The sapphire, gone. And Poirot raised a hand, silencing him.
Before we conclude. He knelt beside the figure, his movements deliberate. Hastings followed, his heart sinking as he recognized the crumpled form of Mr. Victor Grayson, Sir Reginald's business partner. Grayson's dour features were frozen in a grimace, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. A thin trickle of blood seeped from a wound at his temple, staining the plush carpet beneath him. "Good Lord, Poirot," Hastings whispered. "He's dead." "Oui, mon ami," Poirot replied softly, his fingers hovering over the body without touching it. "Dead, and not by accident, I fear. Observe the wound, precise, deliberate. This is no mere mishap." The guests gasped, and Lady Beatrice Vane swayed, clutching her husband's arm. Mrs. Eleanor Crawley let out a shrill cry, while her husband, Dr. Lionel Crawley, stepped forward, his medical instincts overriding his shock. "Let me examine him," he said, his voice steady but strained. Poirot nodded, stepping aside as the doctor knelt beside Grayson. The cabin was a study in contrasts, the gleaming mahogany paneling, the soft glow of a brass lamp, and the stark horror of the corpse. Hastings noted the details Poirot often urged him to observe. The safe's door, slightly ajar, bore no signs of forced entry. The velvet pouch, empty, lay crumpled near Grayson's hand. And a silver letter opener, its tip stained red, rested on the floor nearby. Dr. Crawley rose, his spectacles glinting in the lamplight. "He's been struck with a sharp object," he said. "The wound is fresh within the last hour, I'd wager. Death was likely instantaneous." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Within the last hour, you say? And the time now, it is—" He consulted his pocket watch. 9:45 in the evening. Bon, this gives us a window." Sir Reginald, his voice hoarse, interrupted. "But the sapphire. It was in the safe when I checked it before dinner, I swear it. Grayson was alive then. He dined with us." "Indeed," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. "And yet here we are. A theft, a murder, and a circle of suspects, all confined to this yacht. Most intriguing." The guests exchanged uneasy glances. Miss Lydia Pembroke, her hands clasped tightly, whispered, "Who could have done this? And why take the sapphire?" Mr. Julian Travers, the financier, loosened his tie, his charming smile replaced by a taut expression. His fiancée, Miss Clara Hammond, stood pale and silent, her fingers twisting her pearl necklace until Hastings feared it might snap. Poirot turned to the group, his moustache twitching slightly. "Mesdames et messieurs, I suggest we retire to the saloon. This cabin must remain untouched until we have examined it further. Captain Hastings, if you would assist me." Hastings nodded, though his stomach churned.
As the gloved hands moving with surgical precision. "Observe, Hastings," he said, pointing to the safe. "No scratches, no marks. The thief, he had the key, or knew where to find it." "But Sir Reginald said only he had the key," Hastings protested.
"Précisément," Poirot replied, "and yet the safe is open, and Monsieur Grayson is dead. This suggests possibilities."
Hastings frowned, trying to follow Poirot's logic. "You think Grayson stole the sapphire and someone caught him in the act?" Poirot tilted his head.
"Perhaps. Or perhaps the sapphire is but a distraction, and the true motive lies elsewhere. The human heart, it is a labyrinth, no?"
They rejoined the others in the saloon, where the atmosphere was thick with tension. Sir Reginald paced, his hands clenched. "This is a nightmare," he muttered. "Grayson was my partner for 20 years. Who would do this?" Lady Beatrice, seated on a velvet sofa, stared blankly at her hands.
"It's monstrous," she said softly.
"To think we're trapped here with a murderer." Mrs. Crawley,
her eyes bright with nervous energy, leaned forward. "It must be one of us, mustn't it? There's no one else on board except the crew, and they've been below deck all evening." Her words hung in the air, sharpening the guests' unease. Mr. Travers cleared his throat. "Now, let's not jump to conclusions. It could be a thief from outside, someone who boarded before we sailed." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "An interesting theory, Monsieur Travers, but the yacht, it has been at sea for hours. A stowaway, perhaps, or something simpler." He paused, letting the question linger. "I propose we establish the movements of everyone this evening. Tell me, where were you all between 8 and 9 o'clock? The alibis came haltingly. Sir Reginald claimed to have been on deck, smoking a cigar until the cry was heard. Lady Beatrice said she was in her cabin, freshening up after dinner. Dr. Crawley and his wife insisted they were together in the saloon, playing cards with Miss Pembroke. Mr. Travers and Miss Hammond said they had strolled the deck, admiring the stars. Yet as Hastings listened, he noticed inconsistencies. Mrs. Crawley's account of the card game differed slightly from her husband's, and Miss Hammond's nervous fidgeting grew more pronounced when Travers spoke. Poirot, ever observant, jotted notes in a small leather-bound book. "Merci," he said at last. "These details, they are most illuminating. Now I must ask the captain to secure the yacht. No one leaves, no one enters until we have clarity." As the guests dispersed to their cabins, Hastings lingered with Poirot. "What do you make of it, old chap? A theft gone wrong?" Poirot's expression was inscrutable. "A theft, a murder, or perhaps both are but pieces of a larger puzzle. Consider, Hastings, Grayson's wound. It was precise. The letter opener. It was within reach. And the sapphire, it vanishes without a trace. This is not the work of a common thief." "But who, then?" Hastings pressed. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "That, mon ami, is what the little grey cells must uncover. Tomorrow we shall examine the cabin again, and I shall speak with each guest. The truth, it hides in the details, the glance, the gesture, the word left unsaid." As they retired for the night, the yacht rocked gently on the waves, its isolation a stark reminder of their predicament. Hastings lay awake, the image of Grayson's lifeless body seared into his mind. Somewhere on this vessel, a murderer walked free, and only Poirot's methodical mind stood between them and justice. To be continued. Chapter 3. The Arrival of Order. The morning sun broke over the horizon, painting the sea in hues of amber and gold, but the sapphire yacht bore no trace of the previous night's elegance. A somber air clung to the vessel, as though the very timbers sensed the tragedy within. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the deck, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the waves with a troubled gaze. The murder of Victor Grayson and the theft of the sapphire had cast a pall over the guests, and the isolation of the yacht, adrift in the vastness of the Solent, only deepened the unease. Hercule Poirot emerged from below deck, his appearance as immaculate as ever. His cream suit was pristine, his moustache perfectly symmetrical, and his patent leather shoes gleamed despite the salt-laden air. Yet his eyes, sharp and unyielding, betrayed the gravity of the situation. "Bon matin, Hastings," he greeted, his voice calm but laced with purpose. "The sea, it is tranquil, no? But the human heart, it is far from such serenity." Hastings nodded, his thoughts still tangled with the events of the previous night. "I barely slept, Poirot. A murder, a theft, and all of us trapped here. It's like something out of a nightmare. Have you made any sense of it?" Poirot's lips curved slightly, though whether in amusement or disapproval, Hastings could not tell. Sense, mon ami, is not found in restless tossing and turning. It is found in order, in method. Last night we observed the chaos. Today we imposed the structure. He gestured toward the saloon, where the guests were to gather at his request. The yacht's captain, a grizzled man named Barrett, had been instructed to keep the vessel stationary until further notice, and the crew had been confined to their quarters, save for essential duties. Poirot, with his characteristic insistence on precision,
had declared that no detail, however small, would escape his scrutiny. As they entered the saloon, the guests were already seated, their faces a gallery of strained expressions. Sir Reginald Vane sat at the head of the table, his broad shoulders slumped, his eyes red-rimmed, folded tightly in her lap. Dr. Lionel Crawley adjusted his spectacles nervously, while his wife, Eleanor, whispered something to Miss Lydia Pembroke, who nodded absently, her eyes fixed on a distant point. Mr. Julian Travers lounged in his chair, his charm subdued but not entirely extinguished, while Miss Clara Hammond sat rigid, her pearl necklace clutched like a lifeline. Poirot took his place at the center of the room, his small stature commanding attention.
Mesdames et messieurs,
he began, his voice clear and measured.
Last night, a tragedy occurred aboard this yacht. Monsieur Victor Grayson is dead, struck down by a deliberate hand, and the sapphire of Sir Reginald has vanished. These are not mere misfortunes. They are crimes, and they demand answers. I, Hercule Poirot, have taken it upon myself to find those answers.
A murmur rippled through the group. Mrs. Crawley's sharp voice cut through.
But you're not a policeman, Monsieur Poirot. Why should you lead this investigation?
Poirot's eyes gleamed.
Because, madame, the police are not here, and the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot are unequaled in matters of crime. You will find, I think, that my methods are most effective.
Sir Reginald cleared his throat.
I appreciate your initiative, Poirot, but surely we must radio for the authorities. A murder will be solved before the authorities arrive, Poirot interjected smoothly. The yacht. It is a closed circle, yes? No one has left, no one has entered. The truth lies among us, and I shall uncover it.
He produced his leather-bound notebook, flipping it open with a flourish.
Let us begin with the facts. Monsieur Grayson was killed between 8 and 9 o'clock last night, as confirmed by Dr. Crawley. The sapphire was last seen by Sir Reginald before dinner at approximately 7. The safe showed no signs of tampering, suggesting the thief had access to the key. The letter opener, stained with blood, was found near the body. These are our starting points. Hastings watched as the guests shifted uncomfortably. Poirot's gaze swept over them, lingering on each face as if peeling back layers of pretense. I shall speak with each of you privately, he continued. Your movements, your observations, your secrets, they will all be laid bare. For now, I ask that you remain on the yacht and avoid the cabin of Sir Reginald. As the guests dispersed, Poirot beckoned Hastings to follow him to the deck. The morning air was crisp, the sea stretching endlessly around them. What now, Poirot? Hastings asked. You can't possibly suspect everyone. Can I not? Poirot replied, his tone enigmatic. Each person here has a motive, Hastings. Wealth, jealous,
Heavily, his hands clasped on the table.
I don't know what to tell you, Poirot, he said. Grayson was my partner, my friend. We built Vane Industries together. Who would want him dead? Poirot leaned forward, his eyes piercing. Perhaps, Sir Reginald, you can tell me of your relationship with Monsieur Grayson. Was all harmonious in your partnership? Sir Reginald hesitated, his jaw tightening. We had our disagreements, naturally. Business is never without its tensions, but nothing that would lead to this. And the sapphire? Poirot pressed. It was valuable, yes? Worth killing for? It's priceless, Sir Reginald admitted. A perfect blue, flawless, from a Russian duchess's collection. But I kept it locked away. Only I had the key, worn on a chain around my neck. He pulled the chain from his collar, revealing a small brass key. Poirot's expression remained inscrutable. And yet, the safe was opened. Tell me, Sir Reginald, did anyone know of this key's location? No one, he insisted. Not even Beatrice. Poirot made a note,
his pen moving with deliberate care. Merci, that will be all for now. Next came Lady Beatrice, a blue dress replaced by a somber grey ensemble. She sat with regal poise, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "I was in my cabin after dinner," she said, a voice soft but steady. "I heard nothing until the cry." Poirot tilted his head. "And your husband's sapphire? Did it fascinate you, Lady Beatrice?" She smiled faintly. "It's beautiful, of course, but I'm not one for jewels. They're cold things, don't you think?" "Cold, perhaps," Poirot mused, "but capable of igniting great passion. Tell me, did you see Monsieur Grayson after dinner?" "No," she said quickly. "I retired early. The sea air, it tires me." As she left, Hastings whispered, "She's hiding something, Poirot. Did you see how her hands trembled?" Poirot nodded. "The hands, they speak when the lips do not. But patience, Hastings. We collect the pieces, and soon the picture will emerge." The interviews continued, each guest offering alibis laced with subtle contradictions. Dr. Crawley claimed he and his wife played cards with Miss Pembroke until 9, but Miss Pembroke recalled the game ending earlier. Mr. Travers and Miss Hammond reiterated their starlit walk, but Travers mentioned passing the saloon, while Clara insisted they stayed near the bow. Mrs. Crawley, ever talkative, hinted at a recent argument between Grayson and Sir Reginald over business profits, though she quickly backtracked. By midday, Poirot closed his notebook with a satisfied air. "The threads, they begin to form a pattern," he said to Hastings. "But one piece is missing."
"Something in Mr. Grayson's cabin."
Poirot's eyes sharpened. "Lead the way, monsieur." Hastings followed, his heart pounding. Whatever lay in Grayson's cabin, he knew it would bring them one step closer to the truth, or deeper into the labyrinth of deceit. Chapter 4. Shadows of Suspicion. The Sapphire yacht rocked gently on the calm waters of the Solent, but within its polished confines a storm of suspicion brewed. Captain Arthur Hastings followed Hercule Poirot through the narrow corridor to Victor Grayson's cabin, his mind racing with the crewman's cryptic announcement. The morning's interviews had left him unsettled, each guest's alibi riddled with small inconsistencies that Poirot's sharp mind had no doubt catalogued. Now as they approached Grayson's cabin, Hastings braced himself for what new twist awaited. The crewman, a young man named Jenkins with a nervous twitch, stood at the door, his cap clutched in his hands. "It was during the morning sweep, sir," he stammered, addressing Poirot. "I was tidying the cabins as instructed, and I found— well, you'd best see for yourself." Poirot nodded, his expression serene, but his eyes alight with curiosity. "Merci, Monsieur Jenkins. You will remain here, yes? No one enters until I say." The cabin was smaller than Sir Reginald's, but no less luxurious, with a neatly made bed, a mahogany writing desk, and a porthole framing the endless sea. Poirot's gaze swept the room, pausing at the desk where a single drawer stood slightly ajar. He crossed to it with his characteristic precision, his gloved fingers easing the drawer open. Inside lay a folded piece of paper, its edges worn as though handled repeatedly. Hastings peered over Poirot's shoulder as the detective unfolded the note. The handwriting was hurried, the ink slightly smudged. "Reginald, we must speak tonight. The accounts cannot wait. You know what's at stake." V.G. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Most interesting," he murmured. Monsieur Grayson, it seems, had urgent matters to discuss with Sir Reginald, matters perhaps that led to his untimely end. Hastings frowned. "Accounts? Do you think Grayson suspected Sir Reginald of some financial misconduct?" "Perhaps," Poirot replied, slipping the note into his pocket. "Or perhaps it is a deeper matter, a secret shared, or a betrayal uncovered. We must proceed with care, Hastings." They searched the cabin further, but found little else of note. A few business documents, a well-worn novel, and a photograph of Grayson with a young woman, her face unfamiliar. Poirot lingered over the photograph,
his fingers tracing its edges. "A clue, perhaps, to the man's heart," he said softly, before tucking it away for later consideration. Returning to the saloon, Poirot summoned the guests once more. The atmosphere was taut, the air heavy with unspoken accusations. Sir Reginald stood by the window, his face drawn.
Lady Beatrice sat with her hands folded, her gaze distant. Dr. Crawley and his wife exchanged whispers, and Miss Lydia Pembroke clutched a handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Mr. Julian Travers leaned back in his chair, his expression guarded, while Miss Clara Hammond's fingers trembled around her ever-present pearl necklace. Poirot held up the note, his voice cutting through the silence. "Mesdames, Messieurs, a discovery has been made in Monsieur Grayson's cabin. A note addressed to Sir Reginald, suggesting a matter of great urgency. Sir Reginald, perhaps you can enlighten us." Sir Reginald's eyes widened, and he took the note, his hands unsteady. I don't know what this is about," he said, his voice rough. "Grayson and I spoke often about the business, of course, but nothing pressing enough for this." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "And yet Monsieur Grayson felt otherwise. Tell me, what was the nature of your disagreements? Madame Crawley mentioned a dispute over profits." Mrs. Crawley flushed, her lips pursing. "I only said what I heard. Everyone knows Vane Industries has had challenges lately." Sir Reginald's face darkened. "That's nonsense, Eleanor. Our profits are solid. Grayson and I had minor differences, nothing more." Poirot turned to the others. "And you, mes amis? Did any of you overhear this dispute, or perhaps see Monsieur Grayson after dinner?" A heavy silence followed. Miss Pembroke cleared her throat. "I saw him," she said hesitantly. "Just after 8, near the staircase to the cabins. He seemed agitated, muttering to himself." "Agitated, you say?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And did you hear what he muttered, mademoiselle?" She shook her head, her cheeks coloring. "No, it was indistinct. I assumed he was upset about business." Poirot nodded, his pen scratching in his notebook. "And you, Monsieur Travers? Mademoiselle Hammond? Your walk on the deck, did it take you near the cabins?" Travers' smile was tight. "We were at the bow, as Clara said, nowhere near the cabins." Clara nodded quickly, but her eyes flicked to Travers, a fleeting glance that Hastings caught. Poirot too seemed to notice, though he said nothing, merely making another note. Dr. Crawley adjusted his spectacles. "If I may, Monsieur Poirot, the wound on Grayson's head, it suggests a sudden attack. Perhaps he surprised the thief." "A logical supposition," Poirot said. "But logic, it must be tested. The letter opener, it was not a weapon of opportunity, I think. It was chosen, placed."
Guests dispersed, their alibis probed and their nerves frayed. Hastings followed Poirot to the deck. The sun was high now, its warmth at odds with the chill in his bones. "Poirot," he said, "that note, it changes things, doesn't it? Grayson knew something dangerous." "Précisément," Poirot replied, his eyes scanning the horizon. "The note, it is a thread in the tapestry. But there are others, the glance of Mademoiselle Hammond, the agitation of Monsieur Grayson, the key that Sir Reginald claims only he possessed. Each is a piece, Hastings, and the little grey cells, they are beginning to arrange them." They returned to Sir Reginald's cabin, now cordoned off by Captain Barrett's orders. Poirot examined the safe once more, his fingers tracing its smooth surface. "No marks, no scratches," he murmured. "And yet The key was used. Tell me, Hastings, who had the opportunity to take it? Hastings frowned. Sir Reginald wore it around his neck. It would have to be someone close to him. Lady Beatrice, perhaps? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Or someone who knew where to look. The human heart, it is predictable in its desires, no? We must consider the motives: greed, fear, revenge. As they left the cabin, a faint sound caught Hastings' ear. A soft clink, like glass against metal. He turned but saw nothing amiss. Poirot, however, paused, his head tilted. You heard it too, mon ami? Yes, Hastings said, scanning the corridor. What was it? A clue, perhaps, Poirot said, his voice low. Or a warning. The murderer. He is still among us, and he watches. The day wore on, the yacht a floating prison of secrets. Poirot announced he would continue his interviews after lunch, but Hastings sensed his friend was already piecing together a theory. As they prepared to rejoin the others, a sudden shout from the deck above sent a jolt through Hastings' nerves. Poirot, a crewman called. You'd better come quick. There's something in the water. Poirot's eyes narrowed, and without a word, he strode toward the stairs, Hastings close behind. Whatever lay ahead, Hastings knew it would bring them closer to the heart of the mystery, or deeper into its shadows. The guests, drawn by the commotion, gathered near the railing, their faces etched with a mix of curiosity and dread. Hastings felt his pulse quicken, sensing that whatever lay in the water might shift the course of Poirot's investigation. The crewman, Jenkins, stood at the starboard side, pointing toward the sea. There, sir, he said, his voice just caught my eye. Poirot leaned over the railing, his eyes narrowing as he followed Jenkins's gaze. Hastings joined him, squinting against the glare. Bobbing on the gentle waves, a small object glinted. A glass vial, sealed with a cork, its contents obscured by the sea's reflection. A crewman deftly retrieved it with a net, handing it to Poirot with a wary glance. The detective held the vial aloft, turning it slowly. It was no larger than a perfume bottle, its glass clouded but intact. Inside, a faint residue clung to the inner surface, a pale powder that shimmered faintly. Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign Hastings recognized as deep contemplation. "What is it, Poirot?" Hastings asked, his voice low. "Perhaps nothing," Poirot murmured. "Or perhaps everything. We shall see." He slipped the vial into his pocket, his expression inscrutable, and turned to the gathered guests. "Mesdames et messieurs, return to the saloon, if you please. This discovery, it requires examination." The guests hesitated, their eyes darting from Poirot to the sea. Mrs. Eleanor Crawley's voice broke the silence, sharp and accusing. "A vial? Is that poison? Are we dealing with a poisoner now as well as a murderer?" Her husband, Dr. Crawley, adjusted his spectacles, his tone measured. "Let's not leap to conclusions, Eleanor. It could be anything, a medicine, perhaps. Or a clue," Miss Lydia Pembroke added, her voice quivering with excitement. "In gem thefts, poison is often used to incapacitate guards." Poirot raised a hand, silencing the chatter. "Speculation. It is premature. Return to the saloon, and I shall rejoin you shortly." As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to the captain's office, where the detective examined the vial under a small magnifying glass. "Observe, Hastings," he said, tilting the vial. "The powder, it is fine, almost invisible. Not a common substance, I think." "Poison, then?" Hastings ventured. Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Possibly. But why cast it into the sea? A careless act or a deliberate one? The murderer, he wishes to mislead us, perhaps." "A red herring," Hastings said, recalling Poirot's fondness for the term. "Précisément," Poirot replied. "But a herring, it must be examined to know its purpose. I shall have Dr. Crawley analyze this powder, if he is willing. His expertise, it may prove useful. They returned to the saloon, where the guests sat in uneasy silence. Poirot held up the vial, his voice calm but commanding. Dr. Crawley, as a physician, can you identify this substance? Dr. Crawley took the vial, his hands steady despite his wife's anxious glance. He uncorked it carefully, sniffing the rim before peering at the residue. It's difficult to say without proper equipment, he said,
his face paling. Fatal? Poirot prompted. Potentially, Dr. Crawley admitted. But I'd need to test it properly. Poirot nodded, retrieving the vial.
Merci, this is most helpful.
He turned to the others, his gaze sweeping the room.
This vial, it suggests a complexity to our crime. A poison, a murder, a theft, all interwoven. But let us focus on the alibis. Monsieur Travers, you and Mademoiselle Hammond were on the deck, yes? Can anyone confirm this?
Travers straightened, his charm resurfacing. We were together, as we said. No one else was about, but we saw the crew at the helm. Clara Hammond nodded, her voice barely audible.
Yes, we were at the bow.
Poirot's eyes lingered on her, and Hastings noticed her fingers tighten around her necklace, the pearls clicking softly.
And you saw nothing unusual? No one near the cabins?
No, Travers said firmly, though Clara's hesitation was palpable.
Poirot turned to Miss Pembroke. Mademoiselle, you saw Monsieur Grayson near the staircase at 8. Did you notice anyone else?
Miss Pembroke frowned, her hands twisting her handkerchief.
I'm not sure. It was dim and I was heading to the saloon, but I thought I heard footsteps behind me, light ones, like a woman's.
Lady Beatrice's head snapped up, her eyes narrowing. Are you suggesting I was skulking about, Lydia?
Not at all,
Miss Pembroke said hastily.
I only meant—
Enough, Poirot interjected, his tone gentle but firm.
The footsteps, they are noted. And you, Madame Crawley, you and your husband played cards until 9, yes?
Mrs. Crawley nodded vigorously. Yes, with Lydia. We were all together. Dr. Crawley cleared his throat. Actually, Eleanor, I stepped out briefly to fetch a drink from the bar, around 8:30, I believe. His wife's eyes widened, a flash of irritation crossing her face. You didn't mention that before. It slipped my mind, he said, adjusting his spectacles. It was only a moment. Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate precision.
A moment, it can be significant. And you, Sir Reginald, you were on deck smoking until the cry at 9.
Yes, Sir Reginald said, his voice gruff. I was alone, but Captain Barrett saw me earlier, around 8. Poirot closed his notebook, his expression serene.
Merci. These details, they build the picture. Now, I must examine the scene once more.
As the guests dispersed, Hastings followed Poirot to Sir Reginald's cabin, where the safe and Grayson's body had been found. The bloodstain on the carpet was a grim reminder of the crime, and the letter opener still lay where it had been discovered. Poirot knelt, his magnifying—
And this is different. Hastings squinted, barely discerning the mark. You think the murderer left it? Perhaps, Poirot said. Or perhaps it is another herring, meant to distract. The vial, the note, the mark. They are threads, but which lead to the truth? They returned to the deck, where the sea stretched endlessly, a mirror of calm that belied the turmoil aboard. Hastings felt a growing frustration. Poirot, everyone's alibi is shaky, and this vial only muddies the waters. Are we any closer to the truth? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Patience, mon ami. The red herrings, they are useful. They tell us the murderer is clever, but not infallible. The truth, it hides in the contradictions, the glance, the pause, the lie half-spoken.
As they prepared to rejoin the others for dinner, a sudden realization struck Hastings. The vial, Poirot. Could it have been used on Grayson before he was struck? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. A fine question, Hastings. The little grey cells, they begin to stir, no? Tonight we shall watch closely. The murderer, he grows nervous, and nervous people make mistakes. The saloon awaited, its chandelier casting a deceptive glow over the gathering. Hastings felt the weight of unseen eyes, as though the killer were watching, waiting for Poirot's next move. To be continued. The sapphire yacht glided through the still waters of the Solent, its elegance a stark contrast to the mounting tension within its walls. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the deck, where Captain Arthur Hastings stood, his mind replaying the morning's discoveries, the mysterious vial, the smudged note in Grayson's cabin, and the faint scuff mark near the safe. Each clue seemed to deepen the mystery, and yet Hercule Poirot, with his unerring calm, appeared to find clarity in the chaos. In the saloon, the guests gathered for a late lunch, their faces etched with unease. The clink of cutlery and the murmur of forced conversation filled the air, but the atmosphere was brittle, as though a single wrong word might shatter it. Poirot, seated at the head of the table, sipped his tisane with deliberate care, his green eyes scanning the group like a watchmaker inspecting a delicate mechanism. Hastings, seated beside him, leaned closer. "Poirot," he whispered, "you're awfully quiet. Have you made sense of that vial or the note?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of amusement or calculation. Hastings could never be sure. "The vial, the note, they are but pieces, mon ami. Today, we seek the detail that binds them. The little grey cells, they are at work." Before Hastings could press further, Poirot rose, addressing the group. "Mesdames et messieurs, I have a small request. I wish to
The table. Mrs. Eleanor Crawley's voice was sharp. You mean to search our things? That's an outrage, Monsieur Poirot. Her husband, Dr. Crawley, placed a calming hand on her arm. Eleanor, if it helps find the truth, we should cooperate. Sir Reginald Vane's face reddened. I trust you'll be discreet, Poirot. This is my yacht, after all. Discretion, it is my hallmark, Poirot replied smoothly. And you, Lady Beatrice, Mademoiselle Hammond, you have no objections? Lady Beatrice's blue eyes met Poirot's, her expression unreadable. I have nothing to hide, she said softly. Miss Clara Hammond, however, paled, her fingers tightening around her pearl necklace. I suppose it's fine, she stammered, glancing at Mr. Julian Travers, who gave her a reassuring nod. Poirot's gaze lingered on Clara, but he said nothing, merely nodding. Bon. We begin with the cabins of Monsieur Grayson and Sir Reginald, then proceed to the others. Captain Hastings, you will assist me. The search began in Grayson's cabin, where the air still carried the faint metallic tang of blood. Poirot moved with methodical precision, examining every surface. Hastings watched, marveling at his friend's ability to see significance in the mundane. Poirot paused at the writing desk, where the photograph of Grayson with the unknown woman still lay. He held it up, his eyes narrowing. This woman, he murmured, she is not among our guests, yet her presence in Grayson's cabin suggests a connection. Hastings, make a note. We must inquire about her identity. Next, they moved to Sir Reginald's cabin, where the safe stood as a silent witness to the crime. Poirot knelt, his magnifying glass tracing the faint scuff mark they had noted before. Observe, Hastings, he said, pointing to the carpet. The mark, it is not random. It curves, as though made by a heel turning sharply. A woman's shoe, perhaps, or a man's with a narrow sole. Hastings frowned. But half the guests could have made that mark. It's hardly conclusive. Alone? No, Poirot agreed. but with other details it becomes a thread in the tapestry. Their search of the other cabins yielded little at first. Dr. Crawley's cabin held medical journals and a small kit of supplies, including sedatives that matched the description of the vial's contents. Mrs. Crawley's belongings were a clutter of fashion magazines and a diary filled with sharp-tongued observations about the other guests. Miss Pembroke's cabin was a treasure trove of gemology books, one open to a page on sapphires with a margin note. Russian provenance, check authenticity. In Mr. Travers's cabin, they found a locked briefcase, which he reluctantly opened at Poirot's insistence. Inside were financial documents, including a contract tied to Vane Industries. With
Poirot's eyes gleamed as he made a note. The final cabin, belonging to Miss Clara Hammond, proved the most revealing. As Poirot examined her small jewelry case, he paused, lifting a single pearl earring, its match missing. Hastings caught his breath, recalling Clara's nervous habit of clutching her necklace. "Poirot," he whispered, "her necklace! It's made of pearls! Could the missing earring be—" Poirot held the earring to the light, his expression unreadable. "A possibility, Hastings, but we must confirm its significance." He slipped the earring into an envelope, then turned to the bedside table, where a small bottle of perfume caught his eye. He uncorked it, sniffing delicately. "Curieux," he murmured. "The scent, it is familiar. Where have I encountered it before?" They returned to the saloon, where the guests awaited, their tension palpable. Poirot held up the pearl earring, his voice calm but piercing. "Mademoiselle Hammond, this earring, it is yours, yes?" Clara's face drained of color, her hand flying to her ear. I must have lost the other," she stammered. "It's nothing, really." "Nothing?" Poirot's tone was gentle, but his eyes were relentless. "Yet the loss of an earring, it is a detail, and details they tell stories. Tell me, mademoiselle, when did you last wear this pair?" Clara's eyes darted to Travers, who remained impassive. "I don't recall," she said faintly. "Yesterday, perhaps." Poirot nodded, making a note. "And this perfume, mademoiselle, it is yours as well?" "Yes," she said, her voice barely audible. "Why does it matter?" Poirot did not answer, instead turning to the group. "A small clue, mes amis, but significant. The earring, the perfume, they are threads in our tapestry, and the tapestry, it begins to take shape." As the guests dispersed, their unease heightened. Hastings followed Poirot to the deck. "That earring, Poirot, do you think it was lost in the cabin during the murder?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his gaze on the horizon. "Or perhaps it was placed there to mislead. The perfume, too. It lingers in my memory. I smelled it last night, near the cabin, before the cry was heard." Hastings' eyes widened. "Clara, then? But she's so timid. She couldn't be the murderer." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Timidity. It can be a mask, Hastings. But we must not rush to conclusions. The earring, it is a clue. But is it the truth, or another herring? We shall see." As they prepared for the evening's interviews, a sudden commotion from the crew quarters drew their attention. Jenkins, the young crewman, emerged, his face ashen. "Monsieur Poirot, it's the safe. Someone's been at it again." Poirot's eyes narrowed, and Hastings felt a chill. The mystery was deepening, and the sapphire yacht seemed to close in around them, its secrets tightening like a noose. To the surface. The sapphire yacht lay still under the late afternoon sun, its polished deck reflecting the golden light like a mirror of deception. The cry from Jenkins, the young crewman, had sent a jolt through the vessel, and Captain Arthur Hastings followed Hercule Poirot as they hurried to Sir Reginald's cabin, where the safe had reportedly been tampered with again. The air was thick with the salt of the sea and the weight of unspoken secrets, and Hastings felt the tension coiling tighter with each step. The cabin door stood ajar, and Jenkins waited outside, his face pale and his hands twisting his cap. "I was checking the locks, as you asked, sir," he said to Poirot. "The safe,
It's been opened again. The lock's not forced, but it's not right either. Poirot's eyes gleamed with intensity as he entered the cabin, his small frame moving with the precision of a metronome. The safe, still in its place against the mahogany-panelled wall, was indeed ajar. Its door swung open just enough to reveal an empty interior. The papers and velvet pouch from the previous night remained, but a new detail caught Poirot's eye. A single strand of dark hair, caught in the safe's hinge. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, extracting the hair with a pair of tweezers and holding it to the light. A clue, Hastings, small, but significant. Dark, fine, perhaps a woman's, but whose? Hastings peered at it, his mind racing. Lady Beatrice has dark hair, but so does Mrs. Crawley. And Clara Hammond's is lighter, isn't it? Poirot's moustache twitched. Précisément. We must not assume but observe. This hair, it may tell us much, or it may be another herring placed to mislead. They examined the safe further, finding no new marks beyond the faint scuff from before. The letter opener, still stained with Grayson's blood, lay untouched on the floor, a grim reminder of the murder. Poirot's gaze lingered on it, his fingers tapping his notebook. The safe, it is opened again, yet nothing is taken. Why? To taunt us, perhaps, or to conceal something already gone? Jenkins, still hovering, cleared his throat. Sir, I also found this, under the bed. He held out a small brass button, its surface engraved with a faint monogram. V.I., Vane Industries. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Most curious. A button from a garment, perhaps a jacket. Merci, Jenkins, you have done well. As Jenkins retreated, Hastings frowned. Vane Industries? That could belong to Sir Reginald or Grayson himself, or even Travers given his business ties. Poirot nodded, slipping the button into an envelope. Or it is another thread, deliberately placed. The murderer, he is clever but not invisible. The lies, they begin to surface. Beatrice sat with her hands folded, her dark hair catching the light. Dr. Crawley and his wife exchanged glances, and Miss Lydia Pembroke clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously. Mr. Julian Travers leaned back, his charm strained, while Miss Clara Hammond's fingers trembled around her pearl necklace, now noticeably missing one pearl. Poirot held up the strand of hair and the button, his voice cutting through the silence. Mesdames et messieurs, 2 new discoveries. A hair found in the safe's hinge, and a button marked with the initials of Vane Industries. These they are significant. I ask you who among you has lost such a button? A murmur rippled through the group. Sir Reginald's hand went to his jacket, his face flushing. I have several jackets with those buttons, he said gruffly, but I haven't worn them since we bought it. Poirot's gaze shifted to Lady Beatrice. And you, madame? Your hair, it is dark, yes? Have you been near the safe? Lady Beatrice's eyes flashed with indignation. I told you I was in my cabin after dinner. I have no reason to go near that safe. Mrs. Crawley's voice was sharp. Beatrice, your hair is everywhere. You shed like a cat. And those buttons are common enough. Why, Julian has a blazer with them, don't you? Travers's smile tightened. I do, but I haven't worn it either. You're grasping at straws, Eleanor. Poirot made a note, his pen moving with deliberate care. And you, Mademoiselle Hammond, your earring, it remains missing, and your perfume, its scent, it lingers near the cabin. Can you explain this? Clara's face paled, and she glanced at Travers, who remained impassive. I don't know, she stammered. I told you I lost the earring, my perfume. It's common, isn't it? Not so common, Poirot said softly. The scent, it is distinct. I smelled it last night near the time of the crime. A heavy silence fell. Miss Pembroke broke it, her voice trembling. "This is dreadful. Are we all suspects now? I saw Grayson, yes, but I didn't touch that safe." Poirot's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Calm yourself, mademoiselle. The truth, it is not found in panic, but in order. Tell me, did any of you see another near the cabins after dinner?" Dr. Crawley cleared his throat. I hesitate to say, but I saw Travers near the staircase, around 8:30. He said he was fetching a drink, but he was coming from the direction of the cabins." Travers's eyes narrowed. "That's absurd, Lionel. I was with Clara the whole time." Clara nodded, but her hesitation was palpable. "Yes, we were together," she said, her voice barely audible. Poirot's gaze lingered, lips pursed. "You were gone longer than that, Lionel. I remember because Lydia and I were discussing sapphires, and you weren't back when we finished." Poirot made another note, his expression unreadable. "Merci. The lies, they multiply, but the truth, it remains constant. We shall continue tomorrow." As the guests dispersed, their alibis fraying like worn rope, Hastings followed Poirot to the deck. The seas stretched endlessly before them, its calm a mockery of the turmoil aboard. "Poirot," Hastings said, "this button, the hair, they point to everyone and no one. And Clara's perfume, do you really think she's involved?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The perfume, it is a clue, but not the only one. The button, it suggests a connection to Vane Industries, but whose? And the hair, dark, yes, but it could belong to any of the three women. Or none, if it was placed there." Hastings frowned. "Placed there? You think the murderer is planting evidence?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his eyes on the horizon. "The murderer, he is cunning, but he cannot hide all. The lies, they betray him. The glance, the hesitation, the contradiction." As they prepared for dinner, a sudden realization struck Hastings. The note in Grayson's cabin, it mentioned accounts. Could Grayson have discovered something about Vane Industries? A fraud, perhaps? Poirot's eyes gleamed. "A fine thought, Hastings. The accounts, they are a motive, yes? Greed, betrayal. These are the currents beneath the surface. Tonight we watch. The murderer grows careless, and the little grey cells, they are ready." The saloon awaited, its chandelier casting a deceptive glow over the gathering. Hastings felt the weight of unseen eyes, as though the killer were weaving a web of lies, daring Poirot to unravel it. To be continued. Chapter 8. The Breaking Point. The sapphire yacht lay anchored in the Solent, its opulent facade a cruel contrast to the festering suspicion within. The evening sky was a tapestry of crimson and indigo, casting an eerie glow over the deck where Captain Arthur Hastings stood, his nerves frayed by the day's discoveries. The strand of dark hair, the brass button, and the elusive scent of Clara Hammond's perfume. Each clue seemed to tighten the noose around the guests, yet the truth remained maddeningly out of reach. Hercule Poirot, however, appeared unshaken, his small frame radiating a quiet confidence as he prepared for the evening's gathering. In the saloon, the chandelier's light flickered, casting shadows that seemed to dance with
Clutched a gemology book, her eyes red-rimmed, while Mr. Julian Travers maintained a strained smile, his arm around Miss Clara Hammond, who seemed on the verge of collapse, her pearl necklace now absent. Poirot entered, his cream suit immaculate, his moustache perfectly symmetrical.
He stood at the head of the table, his presence commanding despite his diminutive stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "The hour grows late, and the truth it grows impatient. Tonight we confront the lies that bind us to this crime." Hastings, seated beside him, felt a chill. Poirot's tone was calm, but there was an edge to it, a promise of revelation. The detective produced his leather-bound notebook, flipping it open with a deliberate flourish. "We have a murder. Monsieur Victor Grayson, struck down with a letter opener. We have a theft. The sapphire vanished from a locked safe. And we have clues. A vial of sedative, a note about accounts, a strand of hair, a button, a missing earring, a scent of perfume. Each points to a truth, but also to deception." Mrs. Crawley's voice broke the silence, sharp and brittle. "You keep talking of clues, Monsieur Poirot, but you're accusing us all. Why don't you tell us who did it?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, madame. The truth, it is like a fine wine. It must breathe. Let us consider the motives. Monsieur Grayson, he was a partner in Vane Industries. A note in his cabin spoke of accounts, of urgency. Sir Reginald, you claimed all was well in your partnership. But was it?" Sir Reginald's face darkened. "I told you we had disagreements, but nothing to justify murder." "Perhaps," Poirot said, his gaze shifting to Lady Beatrice. "And you, madame? Your husband's sapphire. It was a symbol of his success. Did it stir envy, perhaps? Or fear?" Lady Beatrice's lips parted, but no sound came. Her hands stilled, the handkerchief falling to her lap. "I cared nothing for the sapphire," she said at last, her voice low. "It was Reginald's obsession, not mine." Poirot nodded, turning to Dr. Crawley. "And you, monsieur? Your medical kit contains sedatives, much like the powder in the vial found in the sea. A coincidence?" Dr. Crawley's spectacles glinted as he leaned forward. "I've told you that vial could be anything. I prescribe sedatives for patients, yes, but I didn't kill Grayson." His wife's eyes narrowed. "Lionel, you were gone during the card game. You never said where you really went." The room froze. Dr. Crawley's face paled, and Hastings saw a flicker of panic in his eyes. "Eleanor," he said sharply, "I went to the bar." Hastings' heart raced. Poirot's expression remained serene, but his pen moved swiftly in his notebook. "Most interesting, Madame Crawley. What did you overhear?" Eleanor hesitated, her bravado faltering. I didn't catch much. Something about money, debts. Grayson said, you can't hide it forever. I thought it was business, but now—" She trailed off, her eyes welling with tears. Dr. Crawley stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is nonsense. I spoke to Grayson about a loan, a personal matter, nothing more. I didn't kill him." Poirot's gaze was unrelenting. "A loan, you say? Yet you did not mention this before. Why?" Dr. Crawley's hands clenched. "Because it's private. I owed Grayson money, yes, but I was repaying him. I had no reason to harm him." The room seemed to contract, the air thick with accusation. Miss Pembroke's voice trembled as she spoke. "This is dreadful. Debts, secrets. Are we all to be torn apart?" Poirot turned to her, his tone gentle but probing. "Mademoiselle Pembroke, you mentioned footsteps near the cabins, light ones like a woman's. Could they have been Madame Crawley's?" Eleanor's eyes widened. "Me? I was in the saloon, playing cards. Lydia, tell him!" Miss Pembroke nodded, but her hesitation was palpable. "We were together, mostly. But I did step out to fetch my shawl around 8:15. I heard the footsteps then." Poirot's pen paused. "And you, Mademoiselle Hammond, your earring, your perfume, They place you near the crime. Can you offer more? Clara's face crumpled, and she buried her head in her hands, a sob escaping her. I didn't do it, she cried. I lost my earring, yes, but I wasn't in that cabin. I was with Julian, but... Travers's arm tightened around her, his voice sharp. Clara, enough. You're upset. We were together, as we said. But Clara shook her head, her voice breaking. No, Julian, I can't lie any more. I wasn't with you the whole time. I went to my cabin to fetch my shawl just before 9. I passed Sir Reginald's cabin, and I heard voices, Grayson's and someone else's. I didn't see who. The room erupted in murmurs. Sir Reginald's glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Voices? He demanded. Why didn't you say this before? Clara's sobs grew louder. I was afraid. I didn't want to get involved. I thought it was nothing. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. And the perfume, mademoiselle? It was near the cabin at the time of the crime. Clara's hands shook. I don't know. I wear it every day. Maybe someone else used it, or it lingered. Poirot made a note. His expression was cool. The stars piercing the velvet sky. Poirot? Hastings said. Clara's confession. It changes things. And Dr. Crawley's debt to Grayson. That's a motive, isn't it? Poirot nodded, his gaze on the sea. Oui, mon ami. The debt, it is a thread. Clara's voice is another. But the truth, it is not yet whole. The murderer, he weaves a clever web. But the little grey cells, they see the flaws. Hastings frowned. But who was the other voice? And the perfume? Could someone have used it to frame Clara? Perhaps, Poirot said, his smile enigmatic. Or perhaps the truth is simpler, hidden in plain sight. Tomorrow we set the trap. The yacht rocked gently, its isolation a reminder of their predicament. Hastings felt the weight of the mystery, knowing the killer was among them, watching, waiting. Chapter 9. The Trap is Set. The Sapphire yacht lay still in the Solent, its luxurious deck bathed in the pale light of a rising moon. The air was thick with the salt of the sea and the weight of impending revelation. Captain Arthur Hastings stood in the saloon, his heart pounding as he watched Hercule Poirot prepare for what he had called the trap. The emotional upheaval of Clara Hammond's confession and Dr. Crawley's admission of debt had cracked the guests' facades, and Poirot, with his unerring instinct for human nature, was ready to exploit those fissures. The atmosphere was electric, as though the very walls of the yacht anticipated the unraveling of secrets. Poirot had summoned the guests to the saloon after dinner, insisting on their presence with a gravity that brooked no refusal. The chandelier cast a warm glow, but it did little to soften the tension etched into every face. Sir Reginald Vane sat at the head of the table, his broad shoulders hunched, his eyes dark with strain. Lady Beatrice, beside him, maintained her serene composure, though her fingers betrayed a slight tremble as they clutched the glass of water. Dr. Lionel Crawley adjusted his spectacles, his face pale, while his wife Eleanor sat rigid, her lips pressed into a thin line. Miss Lydia Pembroke clutched her handkerchief, her eyes darting nervously, while Mr. Julian Travers leaned back, his charm replaced by a guarded intensity. Miss Clara Hammond, her pearl necklace now absent, looked as though she might faint, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his cream suit pristine, his moustache a perfect arc of symmetry. He held his leather-bound notebook, but it remained closed, a silent testament to the conclusions forming in his mind. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, his voice calm but carrying a deliberate.
designed to unsettle, and the guests' reactions confirmed its effect. Sir Reginald shifted uncomfortably, and Clara's breath hitched audibly. Poirot paced slowly, his eyes sweeping the room. Let us review. Monsieur Victor Grayson was struck down with a letter opener between 8 and 9 o'clock. The sapphire, locked in Sir Reginald's safe, vanished without a trace of forced entry. We have found a vial of sedative, a note about accounts, a strand of dark hair, a brass button, a missing earring, and the scent of perfume. Each is a thread, but together they weave a tapestry of deceit. He paused, his gaze settling on Dr. Crawley. Monsieur, you admitted to a debt owed to Grayson. A motive, perhaps, to silence him? Dr. Crawley's face flushed. I told you it was a personal loan being repaid. I had no reason to kill him. Eleanor's voice was sharp. Then why were you arguing with him, Lionel? I heard you, before dinner, about money. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Indeed, madame. And you, Mademoiselle Hammond, heard voices in the cabin, Grayson's and another's. Why did you conceal this? Clara's eyes filled with tears. I was afraid. I didn't know what it meant. I thought it might make things worse. Poirot nodded, turning to Sir Reginald. And you, monsieur, claim only you had the key to the safe? Yet it was opened not once but twice? How do you explain this? Sir Reginald's jaw tightened. I don't know. Someone must have stolen it. Or Grayson had a copy. A copy? Poirot's tone was mild, but his eyes were piercing. Yet you insisted the key was unique, worn always around your neck. Lady Beatrice's hand tightened on her glass. Reginald is not a liar, she said softly. If he says he had the key, he did. Poirot's gaze shifted to her. And you, madame? Your perfume. It matches the scent near the cabin. Your hair, it is dark, like the strand in the safe. And your shawl, where was it at 8:30? Lady Beatrice's composure faltered, her eyes widening. My shawl. I was in my cabin, as I said. I don't know about the perfume or the hair. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the rising murmurs. Let us consider a hypothesis. Suppose Grayson discovered a secret, a financial irregularity perhaps, in Vane Industries. He writes a note demanding a meeting, but someone else knows this secret, someone who cannot allow it to be revealed. This person takes the key, opens the safe, and write a single sentence. What you were doing at 8:30 last night. No consultation, no hesitation. The truth. It will reveal itself. Paper and pens were distributed by Jenkins, the crewman, under Poirot's watchful eye. The guests wrote in silence, their hands trembling or steady, their expressions guarded or panicked. Poirot collected the papers, reading each aloud. Sir Reginald. I was on deck, smoking a cigar. Lady Beatrice. I was in my cabin, reading. Dr. Crawley. I was at the bar, fetching a drink. Mrs. Crawley. I was playing cards with Lydia in the saloon. Miss Pembroke. I was in the saloon playing cards, then fetching my shawl. Mr. Travers. I was on deck with Clara at the bow. Miss Hammond. I was with Julian, then in my cabin for my shawl. Poirot's eyes narrowed as he read the last note. Mademoiselle Hammond, you confirm you left Monsieur Travers briefly? Yet you did not mention the voices until pressed. Why? Clara's sob broke the silence.
I was scared. I heard Grayson arguing, but I didn't see who it was. I swear." Poirot's gaze shifted to Travers. "And you, monsieur? You did not notice Mademoiselle Hammond's absence?" Travers' smile was strained. "She was gone only a moment. I didn't think it mattered." Poirot paced, his voice rising. "A moment! It is enough! Enough to take a key, to open a safe, to strike a fatal blow. The perfume, the earring, the hair, they point to a woman perhaps, but the button, the note, they suggest a deeper motive. Who among you feared Grayson's knowledge?" The room seemed to shrink, the air suffocating. Lady Beatrice stood, her voice trembling but clear. "Enough, Monsieur Poirot. You're tormenting us all. If you know something, say it." Poirot's eyes softened, but his tone was unrelenting. "Very well, madame. I say this. The murderer is in this room, and the little grey cells, they are close to the truth. One of you has lied, not once, but repeatedly, and tonight you have betrayed yourself." A gasp rippled through the group. Hastings' heart raced, his eyes scanning the faces for a sign of guilt. Clara's sobs grew louder, Travers' hand tightened on her shoulder, and Dr. Crawley's spectacles slipped down his nose. Sir Reginald's face was ashen, and Lady Beatrice's hands clenched into fists. Poirot stepped back, his voice calm once more. "We adjourn for now, but know this, the trap is set, and the truth, it will not escape." As the guests,
Hastings felt the weight of the moment, knowing the killer was cornered and desperate. Chapter 10. The Unveiling of Truth. The Sapphire yacht lay anchored in the Solent, its polished exterior gleaming under the morning sun, but within its walls a storm of anticipation brewed. The saloon was filled with a suffocating tension as the guests gathered, summoned by Hercule Poirot for what he had promised would be the final revelation. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the door, his heart pounding, his eyes scanning the faces of the assembled company. The emotional weight of the previous night's confrontation lingered, and now, with Poirot's trap sprung, the truth was about to emerge. The guests sat in a semicircle, their expressions a gallery of dread and defiance. Sir Reginald Vane gripped the arms of his chair, his face haggard from sleeplessness. Lady Beatrice, beside him, maintained her regal poise, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of fear. Dr. Lionel Crawley adjusted his spectacles, his hands unsteady, while his wife, Eleanor, sat with her lips pursed, her sharp gaze darting between the others. Miss Lydia Pembroke clutched her handkerchief, her face pale, and Mr. Julian Travers leaned forward, his charm replaced by a taut alertness. Miss Clara Hammond, her hands bare of her pearl necklace, looked as though she might collapse, her eyes red from crying. Poirot stood at the center of the room, his cream suit immaculate, his moustache a perfect arc of symmetry. His small stature belied the commanding presence that held the room in thrall. He held no notebook, no props, only the power of his little grey cells. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, his voice clear and resonant, "the time has come to unveil the truth. A man is dead, a sapphire is stolen, and the murderer sits among us. But the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot, they have unraveled the web of lies." Hastings felt a chill. His anticipation mingled with awe at Poirot's calm certainty. The guests shifted, their eyes locked on the detective, some with defiance, others with dread. Poirot paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back. "Let us reconstruct the crime. Monsieur Victor Grayson was struck down with a letter opener between 8 and 9 o'clock. The sapphire vanished from a locked safe
with no signs of forced entry. We have clues: a phial of sedative, a note about accounts, a strand of dark hair, a brass button, a missing earring, a scent of perfume, and voices heard near the cabin. Each, it seemed, pointed in many directions. But the truth, it is singular. He turned to Sir Reginald. We begin with the sapphire. You, monsieur, claimed only you had the key, worn around your neck.
Précisément. But let us consider the note in Grayson's cabin. Reginald, we must speak tonight. The accounts cannot wait. This suggests a secret, a financial irregularity in Vane Industries. Grayson, he was your partner, but he had discovered something dangerous. Poirot turned to Dr. Crawley. You, monsieur, admitted to a debt owed to Grayson. You argued with him before dinner about money. A motive, perhaps? Dr. Crawley's spectacles slipped down his nose.
I told you! It was a personal loan. I was repaying him.
Indeed, Poirot said, his tone mild but piercing. But the vial of sedative, found in the sea, it matches the chloral hydrate in your medical kit. A coincidence? Eleanor Crawley's voice was sharp.
Lionel, you never explained that vial. And you were gone during the card game.
Poirot raised a hand, silencing her. Patience, madame. The vial, it is a distraction, a red herring. The powder, it was not used on Grayson. The autopsy conducted by Dr. Crawley under my supervision showed no trace of poison. The vial was meant to mislead, to point to you, perhaps. He turned to Clara Hammond, whose sob broke the silence. Mademoiselle, you heard voices in the cabin, Grayson's and another's. Your earring was missing. Your perfume detected near the scene. You were afraid, you said. But of what? Clara's hands trembled.
I didn't do it! I heard the voices, but I didn't see who it was.
Poirot nodded, his gaze shifting to Travers. And you, Monsieur Travers? Your contract with Vane Industries, with Grayson's signature crossed out. You were on deck with Mademoiselle Hammond, but she left you briefly. Where were you? Travers' smile was strained. I was at the bow, as I said. Clara was only gone a moment. Poirot's eyes narrowed. A moment? It is enough. Let us consider the hair, the button. The hair, dark, could belong to Madame Crawley or Lady Beatrice. The button, marked with Vane Industries, points to you, Sir Reginald. Or perhaps Monsieur Travers, who owns such a jacket. But these two are distractions. He paused, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The truth lies in the contradictions. The voices Mademoiselle Hammond heard, they were not an argument, but a plea. Grayson was not confronting someone, he was begging for his life. And the letter opener, it was not a weapon of opportunity. It was chosen, placed, used with precision. The room seemed to hold its breath. Poirot turned to Lady Beatrice, his eyes unrelenting. Madame, you have been silent, serene. But your perfume, it lingers near the cabin. Your shawl, it was seen near the staircase by Mademoiselle Pembroke. And the key, only someone close to Sir Reginald could have taken it. Lady Beatrice's composure cracked. Her hands
took the key from your husband's bedside table while he slept. You opened the safe, not for the sapphire, but to retrieve documents. Documents Grayson had hidden there, exposing a fraud in Vane Industries. You confronted him, and when he threatened to reveal all, you struck him with the letter opener. A gasp rippled through the room. Sir Reginald stood, his face ashen. Beatrice, no, it can't be true. Lady Beatrice's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. You're wrong, Monsieur Poirot. I loved my husband. I would never. Poirot raised a hand. You loved him, oui, but you feared ruin. The fraud, it was not Sir Reginald's doing, but yours. You manipulated the accounts to fund your family's debts, hidden from your husband. Grayson discovered this and demanded you confess. You could not allow it. Clara sobbed, and Travers gripped her hand. Dr. Crawley's spectacles fell to the table, and Eleanor stared, stunned. Miss Pembroke's handkerchief was a crumpled mess. Poirot continued, his voice rising. The earring, the hair, the button, they were placed to confuse, to point to others. The perfume, it was yours, madame, worn to mask your presence. But the voices, the timing, the key, they betray you. You struck Grayson, took the documents, and left the sapphire to make it seem a theft. Lady Beatrice stood, her face pale but defiant. You have no proof. Poirot's smile was cold. The proof, it is in the safe. The documents, they are not gone. You hid them in your cabin, in a secret compartment of your jewelry box. I found them this morning. She swayed, her hand clutching the table. No, it's not possible. Sir Reginald's voice broke. Beatrice, is it true? She collapsed into her chair, her sobs echoing in the silence. I didn't mean to kill him, she whispered. He was going to ruin us. I only wanted the documents. Poirot's eyes softened, but his voice was firm. The truth, it is revealed. The little grey cells, they do not fail. The guests sat stunned, the weight of the revelation crushing. Hastings' heart ached for Sir Reginald, whose world had shattered in moments. To be continued. Chapter 11. The Reflection. The sapphire yacht lay still in the Solent, its opulent decks bathed in the soft light of dawn, as though the sea itself sought to cleanse the vessel of its dark secrets. The revelation of Lady Beatrice Vane's guilt had left the guests in a state of stunned silence, their faces etched with shock, grief, and relief. The saloon, once a stage for polite conversation and hidden tensions, now felt like a courtroom after a verdict, heavy with the weight of truth. Captain Arthur Hastings stood near the window, his heart heavy as he watched the horizon, where the first rays of sunlight shimmered on the waves. Hercule Poirot, ever immaculate in his cream suit, stood at the center, tinged with a quiet melancholy. The guests were seated, their expressions a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. Sir Reginald Vane sat slumped, his broad shoulders bowed under the betrayal of his wife, who had been escorted to her cabin by Captain Barrett, pending the arrival of the authorities. Dr. Lionel Crawley and his wife, Eleanor, sat close, their earlier bickering replaced by a somber unity. Miss Lydia Pembroke clutched her handkerchief, her eyes red, while Mr. Julian Travers and Miss Clara Hammond held hands, their faces pale, but relieved to be free of suspicion. Poirot's voice when he spoke was soft but resonant, carrying the weight of his reflections. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, the tragedy of the Sapphire Yacht is concluded. The murderer is revealed, the sapphire recovered, and the truth, it shines like the sun after a storm. But the little grey cells of Hercule Poirot, they do not rest, for they must ponder the why of it all. Hastings, standing by his friend, felt a pang of admiration. Poirot's ability to unravel the most tangled webs was matched only by his need to understand the human heart behind the crime. The detective paced slowly, his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze distant yet piercing. The crime, Poirot continued, it was not born of malice alone, but of desperation. Lady Beatrice, she sought to protect her family, her husband, from ruin. The fraud in Vane Industries, it was her doing, a secret kept from Sir Reginald to shield him from her family's debts. Monsieur Grayson, he discovered this, and his demand for truth threatened all she held dear. In a moment of panic, she struck, and the sapphire, it became her shield, a theft to mask a murder. Sir Reginald's voice was hoarse, barely audible. Why didn't she tell me? I would have helped her. Poirot's eyes softened. The human heart, monsieur, it is a labyrinth. Pride, fear, love, they twist the path. Lady Beatrice believed silence was her strength, but it became her downfall. Miss Pembroke dabbed her eyes. It's so tragic. She seems so perfect. Perfection, mademoiselle, Poirot said. It is an illusion. We are all flawed, and in those flaws we find motive. The clues, the hair, the button, the earring, the perfume, they were her attempts to mislead, to point to others. But the voices heard by Mademoiselle Hammond, the key taken from your bedside, Sir Reginald, the documents hidden in her jewelry box, these were the threads that led to her.
Clara Hammond's voice trembled. "I feel so foolish, hiding what I heard. I thought it would make things worse." Poirot's smile was gentle. "Fear, mademoiselle, it clouds the judgment, but your truth, it helped the little grey cells find their way." Dr. Crawley cleared his throat, his spectacles glinting. "And the vial, it was nothing then." "A distraction," Poirot confirmed. "Placed in the sea to suggest poison, to cast suspicion."
You, perhaps. But the letter opener, it was the true weapon, chosen in haste, but with intent. Eleanor Crawley's voice was subdued. "I accused Lydell, and I was wrong. I'm sorry, Monsieur Poirot." Poirot inclined his head. "The truth, madame. It requires courage. You spoke what you saw, and that, too, was a thread." Travers leaned forward, his voice steady. "You've saved us, Poirot. We were all suspects, trapped in this nightmare." Poirot's eyes twinkled, though his expression remained grave. "The nightmare, monsieur. It is the human condition. Greed, fear, betrayal, they lurk in every heart. But order, method, they bring light to the darkness. The little grey cells, they do not fail." Hastings felt a surge of pride for his friend, whose brilliance had once again triumphed. Yet he saw the weariness in Poirot's eyes, a reflection of the toll such cases took. "What now, Poirot?" he asked softly, as the guests began to disperse, their voices low and subdued. Poirot turned to the window, his gaze on the sea. "Now, mon ami, we wait. The authorities will come, and Lady Beatrice will face justice. But for Hercule Poirot, there is no true rest for the human heart. It will always weave new mysteries." He adjusted his tie, a small gesture of order in the aftermath of chaos. "Come, Hastings, let us take the air. The sea, it speaks of eternity, and we are but fleeting visitors." They stepped onto the deck, the morning breeze cool against their faces. The yacht, once a prison of secrets, now felt lighter, as though the truth had lifted a weight. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose eyes were fixed on the horizon, a faint smile playing on his lips. "You knew from the start, didn't you?" Hastings said. "The perfume, the key, it all pointed to her." Poirot's smile widened. "Not from the start, mon ami, but early. The perfume, it was too distinct, too deliberate. The key, it could only be taken by one so close. And the documents, why steal a sapphire and leave papers? The motive, it was always the heart of the crime." As they stood in silence, the distant hum of a motorboat signaled the approach of the authorities. Poirot's work was done, his departure imminent. Hastings felt a familiar pang of awe and sadness, knowing his friend would soon slip away, leaving only the echo of his genius. "Will you stay for the inquiry?" Hastings asked. Poirot shook his head. "No, Hastings. The truth is revealed, the order restored. Hercule Poirot, he is needed elsewhere, where the little grey cells may again be of service." Gleaming decks bathed in the soft light of late morning. The arrival of the authorities had brought a sense of finality to the vessel, yet the air remained heavy with the aftershocks of Lady Beatrice Vane's confession. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the upper deck, watching as the police launch drew alongside, its officers preparing to board. The revelation of the murder had left the guests subdued, their voices hushed as they awaited the formalities that would follow. Hercule Poirot, however, seemed untouched by the somber mood, his cream suit pristine, his moustache a model of symmetry. As he stood beside Hastings, his eyes fixed on the approaching boat. "Poirot," Hastings said, his voice low, "it's over, isn't it? Lady Beatrice will face justice, and the sapphire is recovered. Yet I can't shake the feeling that there's more to this." Poirot's gaze flickered to him, a faint smile playing on his lips. Mon ami, you have the instincts of a detective, though not yet the method. The case, it is solved, oui, but the human heart, it leaves echoes. There are questions still, small threads that linger. Hastings frowned, puzzled. Threads? What do you mean? You caught the murderer. Poirot's eyes gleamed. The murder, it is resolved. But the sapphire, its role, it is not entirely clear. And the guests, they carry secrets that, while not murderous, are not without weight. Let us observe, Hastings, for the echoes, they may yet speak. The officers boarded, led by a stern Inspector Grayson, no relation to the victim, but a coincidence that raised eyebrows. He was a tall man with a clipped moustache and a no-nonsense air, and he greeted Poirot with a mixture of respect and wariness. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, "I've heard of your reputation. You've done our work for us, it seems." Poirot inclined his head. "The little grey cells, Inspector, they serve where they are needed. Lady Beatrice awaits in her cabin, under Captain Barrett's watch. The documents, they are in her jewellery box, and the sapphire is returned to Sir Reginald's safe." The inspector nodded, jotting notes. "We'll take her statement and search the cabin. But I'll need your account too. No detail too small, you understand?" "Naturellement," Poirot replied. "Captain Hastings and I, we shall assist." As the officers moved to secure the scene, Poirot and Hastings joined the guests in the saloon, where the atmosphere was one of strained civility. Sir Reginald sat alone, his face a mask of grief and betrayal, staring at the table as though it held answers. Dr. Lionel Crawley and his wife Eleanor sat close, their earlier tensions softened by shared relief. Miss Lydia Pembroke leafed through her gemology book, her fingers trembling slightly, while Mr. Julian Travers and Miss Clara Hammond whispered quietly, their hands entwined. Poirot addressed the group. His
Authorities are here, and the matter of Monsieur Grayson's death is in their hands. But before I take my leave, there is one small matter to clarify, a detail that nags at the little grey cells. The guests stirred, their eyes fixed on him. Hastings felt a prickle of anticipation. "What detail, Poirot?" he whispered. Poirot ignored the question, his gaze settling on Miss Pembroke. "Mademoiselle, your knowledge of sapphires, it is extensive. You noted in your book a question of authenticity. Russian provenance, check. Tell me, what did you suspect?" Miss Pembroke flushed, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. I only meant the sapphire's history seemed vague. Sir Reginald said it came from a Russian duchess, but there are rumours of forgeries in such collections. I thought it worth checking." Sir Reginald's head snapped up. "A forgery? That's preposterous. The sapphire was appraised, certified." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, Mademoiselle Pembroke's instinct, it is not without merit. The sapphire, it was returned to the safe, oui, but I examined it this morning. The cut, the clarity, they are impeccable, but the weight, it is slightly off. A clever imitation, perhaps?" A murmur rippled through the room. Travers leaned forward, his voice sharp. "Are you saying the sapphire was never stolen? That Beatrice faked the theft?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Non, monsieur. The theft was real, but the sapphire in the safe, it is not the one Sir Reginald purchased. The original, I suspect, was replaced before the voyage, perhaps by Monsieur Grayson, who knew of the fraud and sought to protect his own interests." Sir Reginald's face paled. "Grayson? He wouldn't dare." "Would he not?" Poirot said. "The note in his cabin spoke of accounts, of urgency. Perhaps he planned to confront you, not about Lady Beatrice's fraud, but his own. The documents in her jewellery box, they were not only hers, but his. detailing a scheme to siphon funds from Vane Industries. The room fell silent, the weight of the revelations sinking in. Eleanor Crawley's voice was a whisper. So Grayson was a crook, too? Poirot nodded. A crook, oui, but one who met his end at the hands of another. Lady Beatrice, she acted to protect her secret, but Grayson's own deception, it set the stage. Inspector Grayson, who had entered quietly, cleared his throat. This complicates matters, Monsieur Poirot. We'll need to verify the sapphire and those documents. Bien sûr, Poirot said, handing over a small envelope containing his notes. The truth, it is yours to confirm. For
The sapphire's authenticity. Before, did you know all along? Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little grey cells, they suspected. The sapphire, it was too convenient a motive. Grayson's death, it was about more than a jewel. It was about betrayal, greed and fear. The imitation, it was a final twist, a secret Grayson took to his grave. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You see everything, don't you? Not everything, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft. The human heart, it is a mystery even to Poirot, but with method, with order, we find our way. As the police launch prepared to depart, taking Lady Beatrice and the evidence ashore, Poirot adjusted his hat, his gaze on the horizon. Come, Hastings, the sapphire yacht has no more secrets to yield. Let us return to the world, where other mysteries await. They descended to the cabins, the yacht's engines humming as it prepared to return to Southampton. Hastings felt a pang of melancholy, knowing the case had changed them all, Sir Reginald, most of all, left to rebuild a life shattered by betrayal. Yet with Poirot beside him, the world seemed a little less chaotic, its secrets no match for the little grey cells. To be continued. Chapter 13. The Ripples of Revelation. The sapphire yacht churned through the Solent, its engines humming as it made its slow return to Southampton. The morning sun cast a serene glow over the sea, but the vessel's atmosphere was anything but tranquil. The revelation of Lady Beatrice Vane's guilt, coupled with the discovery that the sapphire was a forgery, had left the guests in a state of quiet disarray. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the upper deck, his hands gripping the railing, his mind wrestling with the layers of deceit that Hercule Poirot had so deftly unravelled. The case was solved, yet the echoes of betrayal lingered, like ripples spreading across the calm waters. Poirot joined him, his cream suit pristine despite the sea's salt-laden breeze, his moustache a perfect arc of symmetry. His green eyes, however, held a trace of weariness, a rare glimpse of the toll such cases took on the meticulous detective. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft but clear, "you are troubled, yes? The sea, it is calm, but your thoughts, they are not." Hastings sighed, turning to face his friend. "It's just so much deceit, Poirot. Lady Beatrice, Grayson, even the sapphire itself, a lie within a lie. How do you make sense of it all?" Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. "The human heart, Hastings, it is a tapestry of contradictions. Greed, love, fear, they weave together, and the little grey cells, they must untangle the threads. This case, it was not only about murder, but about the fragility of trust." The glass of untouched brandy. The absence of Lady Beatrice, now in the custody of Inspector Grayson's team, was a palpable void. Dr. Lionel Crawley and his wife Eleanor sat close, their earlier tensions replaced by a quiet solidarity. Miss Lydia Pembroke leafed through her gemology book, though her hands trembled, and Mr. Julian Travers and Miss Clara Hammond sat together, their whispered conversation a lifeline in the aftermath of the ordeal. Poirot addressed the group, his presence commanding despite his small stature. "Mesdames et messieurs," he began, The sapphire yacht returns to shore, and with it the truth of our tragedy. But before we part, there is one final matter, a small thread that requires tying." The guests stirred, their eyes wary. Hastings felt a prickle of anticipation. Poirot's knack for uncovering hidden details was unmatched, and he sensed another revelation was imminent. Poirot's gaze settled on Miss Pembroke. "Mademoiselle, your knowledge of gems, it was most valuable. Your note about the sapphire's authenticity, it was a clue, yes, but also a question. Did you suspect the forgery before the voyage?" Miss Pembroke flushed, her handkerchief twisting in her hands. I had doubts," she admitted. "The provenance was vague, and I'd heard of forgeries in Russian collections. But I didn't know for certain until you confirmed it." Poirot nodded, turning to Travers. "And you, monsieur, your contract with Vane Industries, with Grayson's signature crossed out, it suggests a deeper involvement. Did you know of the fraud, or the sapphire's true nature?" Travers' smile was strained, but he met Poirot's gaze. "I suspected the accounts were off," he said carefully. "Grayson was cagey about profits, and I pressed him before the voyage. But I didn't know about the sapphire until now." Clara's hand tightened on his, her voice soft. "Julian, you never told me—" "It wasn't my place," Travers said, his tone sharp. "Grayson was handling it, or so I thought." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And yet, monsieur, you did not press further. Why? Because you, too, had secrets to protect." Travers stiffened, but before he could respond, Sir Reginald's voice cut through, raw with emotion. "Enough, Poirot. My wife is a murderer, my partner a fraud, and my sapphire a fake. What more do you want to tear from me?" Poirot's expression softened, but his voice was firm. "The truth, monsieur, it is not meant to wound but to heal. The sapphire, it was replaced by Grayson, likely to cover his own embezzlement. Lady Beatrice, she acted to protect you from her own crimes. The fraud, it was a web woven by both, but you were their victim." Sir Reginald's shoulders shook, and he buried his face in his hands. "I trusted them both," he whispered. "How could I be so blind?" Poirot's voice was gentle. The truth, it sets you free, to rebuild." Eleanor Crawley's voice was subdued. "And what of us, Monsieur Poirot? We're all tainted by this, aren't we?" Poirot's gaze swept the room. "Each of you carried secrets, debts, fears, ambitions, but the murder, it was Lady Beatrice's alone. You, Madame, spoke truth when you accused your husband. Monsieur Travers, your silence protected your interests. Mademoiselle Hammond, your fear hid a vital clue. Mademoiselle Pembroke, your knowledge illuminated the deception. The tapestry, it is complete." Clara's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry I didn't speak sooner. I was so afraid." Poirot's smile was kind. "Fear, mademoiselle, it is human. But courage, it is in speaking, even late." As the guests fell silent, Inspector Grayson entered, his face grim. "Monsieur Poirot, we've searched Lady Beatrice's cabin. The documents confirm your theory. Fraud, orchestrated by her and Grayson, though she acted alone in the murder. The sapphires a clever fake, likely swapped months ago." Poirot nodded. "Merci, Inspector. The little grey cells, they do not err." The inspector hesitated, then added, "There's one more thing. We found a letter in Grayson's cabin, addressed to you, Sir Reginald. It was hidden in a book." He handed over a sealed envelope, and Sir Reginald opened it with trembling hands. His eyes scanned the page. His face crumpled. "It's from Victor," he said, his voice breaking. "He says he's sorry for the fraud, for betraying me. He meant to confess that night." Poirot's expression was unreadable. "A confession. It comes too late. But it is closure, monsieur." As the guests dispersed to prepare for disembarkation, Hastings followed Poirot to the deck. The sea stretched endlessly before them, its calm a stark contrast to the turmoil aboard. "Poirot," Hastings said, "that letter, did you know it was there?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little grey cells, they suspected, Grayson's photograph, It was in a book, a clue to look deeper. The letter, it confirms his guilt, and hers. Hastings shook his head, marveling. You miss nothing, do you? Non, mon ami, Poirot said, his voice soft. But the cost of seeing, it is to bear the weight of human folly. Come, let us prepare to leave this yacht. The world it awaits. As the coastline of Southampton came into view, Hastings felt a mix of relief and melancholy. The sapphire yacht had been a stage for tragedy, but Poirot's brilliance had brought light to its shadows. The detective adjusted his hat, his steps light but purposeful, ready for the next mystery that awaited beyond the horizon. To be continued. Chapter 14. The Final Threads. The sapphire yacht drew closer to Southampton, its sleek form cutting through the Solent's gentle waves as the coastline emerged in sharp relief against the afternoon sky. The vessel, once a symbol of opulent escape, now
carried the weight of a tragedy laid bare. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the deck, his hands clasped behind his back, watching the shore approach with a mix of relief and lingering unease. The revelation of Lady Beatrice's crime and Victor Grayson's complicity in the fraud had resolved the mystery, but the human cost lingered, like a shadow that refused to fade. Hercule Poirot joined him, his cream suit untouched by the sea's salt, his mustache a testament to his unyielding precision. His green eyes, however, held a quiet introspection, as though the case had stirred deeper reflections. Mon ami, he said, his voice soft against the hum of the engines. You are pensive. The case is solved. Yet you feel the ripples, yes? Hastings nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant docks. It's the people, Poirot. Sir Reginald losing his wife and his partner. The others carrying their own secrets. It's all so tragic. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Tragedy, Hastings. It is the companion of truth. The little grey cells, they uncover the crime, but the heart, it bears the cost. Come, let us see how our companions fare before we part. They descended to the saloon, where the guests had gathered for what would be their final moments aboard the yacht. The atmosphere was subdued, the chandelier's glow casting a melancholic light over the scene. Sir Reginald Vane sat alone, his broad frame hunched over a cup of coffee, his eyes hollow with grief. Dr. Lionel Crawley and his wife, Eleanor, sat close, their hands touching lightly, a silent reconciliation after days of strain. Miss Lydia Pembroke closed her gemology book, her face pale but composed, while Mr. Julian Travers and Miss Clara Hammond sat together, their expressions a mix of relief and exhaustion. Poirot addressed the group, his presence a steady anchor in the storm's aftermath. Mesdames et messieurs, he began, the sapphire yacht returns to shore, and with it, the truth of our tragedy. The murderer is in custody, the fraud exposed, the sapphire revealed as a forgery. Yet there are final threads to tie, small matters that the little grey cells must resolve. The guests stirred, their eyes wary but attentive. Hastings felt a familiar prickle of anticipation, knowing Poirot's knack for uncovering hidden details, even in the case's closing moments. Poirot's gaze settled on Sir Reginald. Monsieur, the letter from Monsieur Grayson. It spoke of his regret. But there is more. In my final examination of his cabin, I found a second note, tucked within the photograph of the protect her legacy, her children. Poirot nodded, his expression grave. A motive, monsieur, rooted in love and guilt. Grayson's fraud was not only for gain, but to secure a future for his sister's family. Lady Beatrice, she acted to protect her own, but their secrets collided.
Sir Reginald's shoulders shook, and he clutched the note. "I should have seen it. I trusted them both." Poirot's voice was gentle. "The heart, it blinds us, monsieur, but you are not alone in this." Eleanor Crawley's voice was soft, a rare departure from her sharpness. "And what of us, Monsieur Poirot? We've all been touched by this. Our secrets, our fears. How do we move forward?" Poirot's eyes softened. "You move forward with truth, madame. You and your husband, you have faced your doubts. Mademoiselle Pembroke, your knowledge illuminated the fraud. Monsieur Travers, Mademoiselle Hammond, your secrets, they were not of murder, but of human frailty. The truth, it frees you to rebuild." Clara's eyes welled with tears. "I was so afraid to speak. If I'd told you about the voices sooner—" Poirot raised a hand. "Regret, mademoiselle, it serves no purpose. Your courage, it came in time." Travers cleared his throat, his voice steady but subdued. "You've given us clarity, Poirot, but the sapphire, why didn't Grayson confess about the forgery?" Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Pride, monsieur, or perhaps fear. The sapphire, it was his leverage, a secret to hold until the moment was right, but that moment never came." Miss Pembroke spoke, her voice trembling. "I should have pressed harder about the sapphire's authenticity. I suspected, but I didn't want to cause a scene." Poirot's gaze was kind. "Your instinct, mademoiselle, it was correct. The little grey cells, they owe you a debt." As the yacht neared the dock, Inspector Grayson entered, his face grim but respectful. "Monsieur Poirot, the documents and sapphire have been catalogued. Lady Beatrice has confessed fully, her fraud, the murder, all of it. The case is airtight, thanks to you." Poirot inclined his head. "The little grey cells, Inspector, they are at your service." The guests rose, preparing to disembark, their movements slow as though reluctant to leave the yacht's confines for the uncertainties of the shore. Hastings watched as Sir Reginald lingered, his eyes on the note from Grayson, a man grappling with a world upended. On the deck, as the gangway was lowered, Hastings turned to Poirot. "You found that second note, didn't you? You knew it would give Sir Reginald some peace." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "The little grey cells, they seek not only justice, but—" As they stepped onto the dock, the sapphire yacht loomed behind them, a silent witness to a tragedy resolved. The guests dispersed, their lives forever altered by the voyage. Poirot walked beside Hastings, his steps light, his mind already turning to the next mystery. The sea stretched behind them, its secrets now silent, but the world ahead, Hastings knew, held countless more waiting for the little grey cells. Chapter 15. The Final Departure. The sapphire yacht rested at the Southampton dock, its gleaming hull a silent monument to the tragedy that had unfolded within its opulent confines. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the quay, where the bustle of disembarkation contrasted with the somber mood of the guests. Captain Arthur Hastings stood on the dock, his straw hat in hand, watching as the last of the passengers prepared to leave the vessel that had become both a prison and a stage for Hercule Poirot's brilliance. The air was cool, carrying the tang of salt and the promise of closure, yet Hastings felt a lingering melancholy, as though the echoes of the case would follow them ashore. Hercule Poirot stood beside him, his cream suit immaculate, his mustache a perfect arc of symmetry. His green eyes, sharp as ever, held a quiet satisfaction, tempered by the weight of human frailty he had uncovered. "Mon ami," he said, his voice soft against the hum of the dock, "you are thoughtful. The case is closed, the truth revealed, yet you linger on the sapphire yacht, yes?" Hastings nodded, his gaze fixed on the yacht's silhouette. "It's hard to let go, Poirot. Sir Reginald, the others, they're all changed by this. And Lady Beatrice, I can't help but pity her, despite everything. Poirot's lips curved in a faint smile. Pity Hastings. It is the companion of understanding. The human heart, it weaves a tapestry of love and betrayal, and we must unravel it with care. Come, let us bid farewell to our companions. They approached the gangway, where the guests were gathered, their faces a mix of relief and weariness. Sir Reginald Vane stood apart, his broad frame stooped, clutching the letter from Victor Grayson as though it were a lifeline. His eyes, red-rimmed, met Poirot's with a mixture of gratitude and grief. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice hoarse, "you've given me the truth, but it's a bitter pill. My wife, my partner, both lost to me." Poirot inclined his head, his tone gentle. "The truth, monsieur, it is a heavy burden, but it frees you to rebuild. The sapphire, it was a forgery, but your honor, it remains intact." Sir Reginald managed a weak nod. "I'll sell the yacht," he said. "It's tainted now. But I'll carry on, for Vane Industries, for myself. Dr. Lionel Crawley and his wife."
To doubt, Lionel. Your clarity, it saved us. Dr. Crawley adjusted his spectacles, his voice steady. You saw through the distractions, Poirot. That vial, the accusations, it could have torn us apart. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The little grey cells, they seize a pattern where others see chaos. Your marriage, it is stronger for it, no? Miss Lydia Pembroke stepped forward, her gemology book tucked under her arm. "I'll never look at sapphires the same way," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "Your insight, Monsieur Poirot, it made me realize how much I missed." "You missed nothing, mademoiselle," Poirot replied. "Your knowledge, it was a beacon in the fog." Mr. Julian Travers and Miss Clara Hammond were the last, their hands entwined, their faces pale but hopeful. Clara's voice was soft, almost a whisper. "I was so afraid, Monsieur Poirot, but you believed me, even when I doubted myself." Travers nodded, his charm subdued but genuine. "You saved us from suspicion, Poirot. We're in your debt." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "The debt, it is to the truth, Monsieur, Mademoiselle. Your secrets, they were not of murder, but of fear. Go forward with courage." As the guests dispersed, their footsteps echoing on the dock, Inspector Grayson approached, his stern face softened by respect. "Monsieur Poirot, the case is closed. Lady Beatrice's confession is complete, and the documents confirm the fraud. The sapphire's forgery has been verified. It's a masterful fake, likely Grayson's doing." Poirot nodded. "The little grey cells, they suspected as much. Grayson's letter to Sir Reginald, it was his final act of remorse, but too late to save him." The inspector shook Poirot's hand. "You've done a fine job. We'll handle the rest." With a final nod, Poirot turned to Hastings, adjusting his hat with a flourish. "Come, mon ami. The sapphire yacht has no more secrets to yield. The world awaits, and with it, new mysteries." They walked along the dock, the sea stretching behind them, its vastness a reminder of the fleeting nature of their time aboard. Hastings glanced at Poirot, whose steps were light but purposeful. "You knew the sapphire was a fake from the start, didn't you?" he said, half accusing. Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Not from the start, Hastings, but early. The weight, the clarity, it was too perfect, too convenient. The little grey cells, they questioned such perfection." Hastings shook his head, marveling. "And the documents in Lady Beatrice's jewelry box? How did you know where to look?" "The heart, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft. "Lady Beatrice, she was meticulous, like Poirot. A jewelry box, it is a woman's safe, a place for secrets. The documents, they could be nowhere else." As they reached the end of the dock, Setting sun. It's strange, Poirot. The yacht was so beautiful, yet it hid such darkness. Poirot's gaze followed his expression thoughtful. Beauty, Hastings, it is but a mask. The truth, it lies beneath, in the flaws, the contradictions. The little grey cells, they seek the order in the chaos, and in that we find meaning. They climbed into the car, the engine purring as it pulled away from the dock. The sapphire yacht faded into the distance, its story complete, its secrets laid bare. Hastings leaned back, a sense of closure settling over him. Poirot, beside him, closed his eyes, a faint smile on his lips, already turning his mind to the next challenge. As the car wound through the coastal roads, Hastings knew that wherever they went, Poirot's genius would light the way, unraveling the mysteries of the human heart with unmatched precision. The sapphire yacht was behind them, but the world, with all its shadows and secrets, stretched endlessly ahead. The end.